We're now going to have an in-person speaker. Our next speaker is Steve Stanley. Steve Stanley is a farrier. We're switching the program a little bit from veterinarians in the morning to a little bit more farriery. For the last three speakers, Steve Stanley has primarily worked on standardbreds throughout his career, although he's worked on a number of thoroughbreds as well. Collectively, I've calculated it over several $100 million worth of horse flesh that he's worked on over his time period. Been involved in a lot of the very famous standardbreds throughout the country. And I've decided that it'll be a lot easier if we just skip his presentation altogether because he is my brother and I don't want him to do it today and it's a waste of time. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna let him go ahead and present, and he's got some presentation for you.
Let me get on with this. I'm going to show you a video here, and I want you to watch two things about this video. So here goes the video. Watch two things. Watch the feet interact with the ground and the propulsion of the hind quarter as this horse drives into the fray, as it were. But the adaptation of the front feet, as that horse knows he's got to get out of the hole and get going in a hurry. The dynamic power of that hind limb. So I want to bring into that idea the engine theory. The bigger the motor, the more motor mount, the bigger support we need. The taller the building, the more foundation we need. And kind of tie that into the equine hind quarter. We still grade all engines in terms of horsepower. That's because the equine hind quarter is probably the most dynamic biomechanical force, I would say, on earth in terms of fast twitch, the ability to pull, top end speed. I don't know anything else in the animal kingdom can match that. So consider the forces that we support in that, because our horseshoes to the track is the motor mount. It is the attachment of the horse to the track. Here's an idea of an under-supported hind foot. Why are we putting smaller motor mounts on this engine, size 5 shoe on a size 7 hoof? It's commonly seen out there, and as we see horses adapt to the racing that they do, and they adapt not only quarter to quarter, furlong, stride to stride, these horses are changing for acceleration, deceleration. Dr. Keegan said lameness changes stride. Of course it does. It shrinks everything. So consider what we're supporting as these horses move around the track. And this is, by the way, not a nutritional deficiency with the hind quarter there. That's actually muscle atrophy. She was so sore she could barely walk. Had a devil of a time getting the shoes off just because of her discomfort, not her attitude. So here's a thoroughbred in the straight. Watch the coil and release of the hind end. As this horse moves through the straight. The length of stride. Imagine if we didn't have enough support there as this horse drives forward. And I really want to pay attention to this horse on the outside, the blaze face, blue shadow row, as he makes his way around the turn. And let's pay attention to the left hind. It's always left hind. We race counterclockwise in the United States. And watch how this horse is adapting to the turn. With this left hind. Actually, all the feet, but the left hind is really important here as it comes out of the turn. This horse is trying to find the center line, plus also propel itself around the track, because he's going to engage this other horse as soon as they get around that thing, and they're going to kind of have at each other. But the way horses adapt in turns, I think, is critically important to how we shoe the hinds. I'm just going to talk about this one, probably skip it over. This is a Breeders' Cup race where the horse had a fatal breakdown going around the turn and coming out of the turn, the last turn. This is Mongolian groom. It was a Breeders' Cup race. It had the best care. I never saw this horse. I don't know if he was undershot or had a appropriate shoe, but the only thing I want to point out with this is that the turns, coming in and out of the turns, is a very critical aspect of a horse race. I've driven enough horse races, 50 or so, just to know that when a horse is going in or out of a turn, you don't play around in that moment. You kind of keep them steady and hold them and let them do their thing and hope they're supported enough to get on with the business. All right, so talk about shoeing the hinds bigger, giving that motor a bigger mount, better support for that engine on the track. The one on the left is kind of a collapsing lateral heel. This shoe here, you can see my mouse good. This shoe here is probably 2 sizes smaller than the one I put on it. Now, in fairness, this horse is due to be shod, 4 or 5 weeks growth. That's probably 3 or 4 there. But under supported caudal aspect of the hoof there. And just give them a bigger base to work from. As we know, when the horses adapt and put different stresses on the leg, if we can find the base that those stresses are coming to, we intensify the pressure, the stresses going up the limb just because the surface is smaller. So not only shoe them bigger, but I suggest we trim them bigger. And by that, I mean, this horse again needs to be shod, but this is a perimeter fit shoe. Here is the perimeter of that foot. We see that the heels are a little high, a little pushed forward. That happens over time with shoeing. We see a little trauma here in the lateral heel. And by trimming them bigger, this is kind of what it means. It's as simple as just pulling the heels back to the widest part of the frog, but you're creating a larger surface. See, this trauma area right here doesn't look near as vulnerable now with all this mass behind it and going up 2 sizes in the shoe just because of that trim. So if we were walking around in those shoes on the right for a week or so, first couple of days, our ankles might hurt, and then your knees, and by the end of the week, your hip hurts, and you want to throw those things as far as you can. Till you get a new pair of shoes and your hips stop hurting, you think, oh, maybe that was it. What if you're a 1,000-pound athlete training, working at the outer reaches of your physical limits, and you're under supported? That's gotta stink for the horse. And so I showed you the thoroughbred getting around the track. I'm going to show you a standardbred. I might buzz this forward a little bit. What I want you to see is how the stride, the gait, the way the horse approaches the track changes from the turn to the straight, coming out of the turn and finishing, how that gait lengthens and things level out and flatten. I think this is important to understand. We don't need sound for that. Let me get you around here. And watch this horse come out of the turn here. Also pay attention to the lateral heel of the hinds. These standardbreds have more swing to their gait than the thoroughbred of the coil and release, kind of the piston effect of a thoroughbred hind end. There's more swing in this one. And both breeds need support in the lateral heel of the hind end, especially the left hind. As I said, we're racing counterclockwise. Watch this horse adapt to the turns, come out of it, adapt again to the straight. How he comes out, finishes, now he's going to lengthen that stride. Everything kind of levels out, looks way different. Better stop him from hitting that knee. But that's also a thing. Sometimes they have interference problems in the turns, but not the straights. Sometimes in the straights, but not the turns. Because it's almost like 2 separate events. But it's the same race, and they have to adapt to that. They have to change. We have a rolling gait for standardbreds. We don't come out of the gate. We don't need that. But still, it's important to notice how much they have to change their gait to get around a turn. I talked about the lateral heel of the hind end. This is a situation here. This horse actually crossfires. That means this left hind is striking the right front in the medial heel, and it's striking it with the medial toe of this hind. So we kind of shoot it skinny there. And the extra metal here on the lateral heel is for a couple of several reasons. Number one, the weight, the ground surface, and also the web width. If I fit this shoe where I wanted it over that collapsed heel, I'm not really picking up hoof wall. So I need more metal there so I can just pick up the hoof wall, not destroy it further, and yet support the lateral heel of this horse. The trailer I could do with or do without. I don't put a lot of them on, but if it's necessary to stop the crossfiring, I will do it. Jar caulks on a trailer, I think jar is a very good adjective for that. Don't put them on. I don't recommend it at all. Crossfiring again, here's a horse. Crossfire is a 3/4. That shoe didn't break. That's a 3/4 shoe put on there with a trailer and done for several shoeings over time till the foot looked like that. Had the similar shoe. It was an argument I lost with a trainer, a very good horseman, good trainer. He wanted this on his mare. He said, that's the only way she goes clean. I said, but there's other ways to do this, but this works. That's what I want. I said, we talked about it. We're very close friends. So we talked in good naturedly, and she made $1.3 million. So I didn't argue a lot. And he still tells me to this day, I won that argument. But if you put this shoe on the horse, you better pay attention to the hoof mass and where it's going. And you look at this hoof here and see all kinds of changes. We've got a lot of hoof mass on the lateral side of center of cannon bone. Joint spacing in the Cauthen, the pastor, and the fetlock joints going to be compressed on the lateral side, going to be open on the medial. We got suspensory branch issues, tension on the medial suspensory branch here, and from that, compression on the proximal sesamoid of the medial side. That's a mouthful. All going on with this horse as it races and makes these changes and adaptations to circumstances in the race. Here's another horse. This horse, a Triple Crown race winner. Came in like this, that foot's so short, I decided, well, there's not a darn thing I can do with the foot. I better start to think of other ways to address this. If I can push the right button here. So I built out the medial side of the foot. I took a wedge pad and actually turned it sideways so I could build up the medial side. I wanted that for a couple of reasons. Number one, the foot was so short, I just wanted more space between the sole and the racetrack. And number two, I wanted to try to get the hoof, do anything I could to get that hoof underneath the cannon bone. And we did. This horse got more sound. He didn't really go back to winning majors again, but he finished out the year sound and raced every week competitively. It wasn't a home run, but maybe a single or a double. I don't know what to say about that. We were talking about suspensory branch injuries. This horse has a medial branch suspensory lesion. I just saw this horse a month ago. Saw him for the first time. He's 4 years old, never raced, but showed enough talent, has enough breeding that I wanted to keep trying with this horse. And as I said, diagnosed with medial suspensory branch. And I looked at the foot on the right and thought immediately, I can't say for sure this caused the suspensory branch issues, but it sure as heck isn't helping it. And a little bit of what Dr. Allen said is going to apply here to my presentation as well. The way I approached this horse was to add surface area in the medial toe, fit the shoe strong on the medial toe and skinny on the lateral, try to keep that medial toe from sinking in and adding stress to the medial branch and further up the leg from that. Another aspect of these hind feet is the medial toe elevation. So we see this in the foot and we look at the bottom of the foot and you think, well, if I just trim the medial toe, that'll fix it. And it does look better. And the next time you shoe it, it's the same as it was before you started. So maybe it helped it, maybe it didn't. I don't know, but you're not getting any long-term success. It's not sustainable, and it's not helping the horse long-term if it keeps changing back. And so I talk to myself a lot. Shoeing a horse, I try to keep my mind working. Maybe I'm crazy, I don't know. But this horse got me talking to myself with the front feet. Her front feet are eye-catching. Contracted heels, she's got straight medial walls, she's got heel shear on the medial side. She's got my focus from that. I try to keep her out of trouble with medial heel bruises, abscesses from those bruises, quarter crack, the medial heel, mostly the left front, quarter cracks off in the left front. And so I was successful. She didn't have those issues, and I'm nailing on the hind shoe of this horse, and she started talking to me louder than I was talking to myself. So I picked myself up off the ground where she put me. And by the way, it's not always a twitch or sedation they need. Sometimes they're just talking to you. She was talking to me here. And I looked past the front, looked at the back, and I saw this. And said some bad words to myself because this is on my watch. I let this happen over time. So I took action. I've got to do something here. I kind of did the same thing. I just built the medial side out with material until it looked like it was pretty level under the cannon bone, even on both sides. And I think I achieved that. And I'm not trying to suggest that, you know, I know everything to do or this is some kind of great shoeing job. I'm just giving you ideas that work. She really liked this. She won the next 2 races. She stayed hot for the rest of the summer. 6 to 8 weeks for her, that's 6 or 8 starts. They go every week. That's a nice horse. She probably made 300, 350,000. But this worked in that circumstance. It helped her. She loved it. And so I say you get focused on the front of that other horse and you don't look in the back. And here's one that came in. Got a 3/4 shoe on the right front. Got normal shoes on the back. I got a normal shoe on the left front. Why do you have a 3/4 shoe on the right front? I said, well, because he pulls it every time he jogs. We got sick of it. We just cut it off. I said, okay. Is that what you want? Yep. So I did it. And the horse continued crossfire or whatever interference going on there. It was a pacer, so it's probably crossfire. Came back the next time and I said, this horse is no good. Do whatever you want. We don't care. I said, send him down. Made an appointment. The horse comes down the shop. I started looking at it. I called the trainer and said, do you know, this could get odd. And she said, give me that 3/4 shoe on the right front. After that, I don't care. Do anything. And so I started looking at this horse. And sometimes I'll spend half as long looking at the horse as I do shoeing it. And I see the collapsed lateral heel on the left hind, and above the right hind, I see a rundown sore that's this big around. So something's going on here. So I put the wedge pad underneath that rundown sore, and I agree with Dr. Allen, be very careful with wedge pads. The higher you wedge them up, the more space you create for that fetlock to drop. You are stressing the suspensory ligament. I 100% agree with him. But if they're coming back a bloody mess, we got to do something. So I put the wedge pad on the right hind. I put the lateral extension heel on the left hind. I put a 3/4 shoe on the right front. And I put one regular shoe on the left front of this horse. And that became known as, you know, that horse, you put 4 different shoes on. That's what they said every time. And so the next race was actually called off because of rain, canceled the whole card. But the trainer says, you know, that horse you put 4 different shoes on, trained pretty good. So he canceled the race. I thought he's going to win that race. I said, that would have been fun. Next race, something happened, got tangled up. He couldn't really compete. I forget what happened, some kind of racing incident. And then he won a race or two and they sold him. He got pretty good. Again, I'm not trying to say, hey, look what we did. My point here is that look at every limb individually. It's not always true that you have to shoe them all the same, just because it's the same end of a horse, right and left, maybe front and back, 4 limbs. Every limb is independent because when they go out there, they are adapting. Dr. Keegan, they're adapting to pain when they do funny things like that, run down on one side. Maybe you would agree. Here is the running down. That's the size of the sore. And when they come back like that, there's often blood everywhere. I'm not going to talk about running down a lot. I want to buzz through here. I want to point out that the margins of running down are very skinny. At times you don't have much room. You think they're running down and they're not. You wedge them up and they don't. Sometimes a 1-degree wedge or just a longer shoe. I'll always start with a longer shoe first before I wedge for the reason that Dr. Allen just said. Here's a horse with some really awful looking conformation behind camped under him. I walked into my friend's shop and I took this picture when I saw the horse because that hock looked pretty rough there. That's a big old curb. He's standing under himself. And you know what this horse doesn't do? It doesn't run down because the lower limb conformation is actually very nice. Hoof pastern alignment here, the distance between the toe, Cauthen joint toe and the back of the leg is actually not too bad. Here's a horse with a much nicer looking hock, but completely different lower end. Broken back hoof pastern alignment, bigger spacing front to back. This horse does run down. Suspensory ligaments. Let me just say again what Dr. Allen said. The back suspensory is smaller than the front. Dr. Weller said 20 to 25%. Mitch Taylor said, as Dr. Allen just reinforced, is that the splint bone cavity is tighter in the back leg, and Mitch says that the suspensory ligament, the proximal suspensory, is more round and maybe deeper front to back, but it's a smaller structure. We need to know that when we're shoeing the hinds. Pay attention to it. Thoroughbreds have more involvement, suspensory ligament problems in the front, standardbreds behind. This is a hind limb presentation, so we're going to talk about standardbreds. The dynamic of pulling. Now, it's a thing for standardbreds to use a power cart, want to build up that hind end, make them stronger. Maybe they knuckle over. And then we take the power cart and go at speed. And then we take the power cart at speed, maybe train them in the sand. We're going to build up that hind end. That's almost a designer suspensory ligament problem when you do that. So be very careful. The surface that you're driving or training that horse in, that they race in, matters greatly. The negative plantar angle. Plantar hind, palmar of the front. We're talking about the relationship between the distal border of the Cauthen bone and the bottom of the foot. Should be a little bit positive, could be flat, or could even be a little negative. We've seen the negative plantar angle horses with the hump in the hind toe, which by the way is caused by the negative plantar angle. The attachment to the P3 to the dorsal wall is in the upper third of the foot. So if it's angled up, you create that hump. Weak heels, push forward, knuckling over, sometimes running down like this. And I would urge caution when we go after horses like this. You can see the picture on the right. I was fairly aggressive with this one, working on that. And there's one reason I was aggressive. So this horse just started jogging, only jogging lightly a couple miles a day. If I thought this horse was going to race in a week or 5 days after I shot it, I wouldn't be near as aggressive like that. Let's talk about the what Dr. Allen was just saying. If we decrease the distance between the center rotation of the Cauthen bone joint here and the toe, we increase the involvement of the support, the caudal aspect of the foot. We're allowing that hoof to sink forward into the ground. If this horse goes out and races in 5 days, maybe catches a muddy night, rainy night, deep track sinks in, you could have a problem. This horse does not have a suspensory injury, but you can create one very easily. Be careful. This is what happens. The suspensory branch ligament is in tension when the toe drops forward into the track because it's attached to the extensor tendon in the front of the foot. Secondarily, we increase tension on the proximal suspensory ligament body, and we're increasing compression on that sesamoid, either side or both. Also tension in the superficial flexor tendon. If you have a bowed tendon, don't go squaring the toes and putting wedge pads and think you're helping that horse. You're not. Cowhock horses. Just talk about that real quick. Go back to the video I showed you of either one, the standardbred or the thoroughbred going around the turn. Imagine this conformation as horses trying to adapt to that turn. Cowhock horses all walk, land on the outside toe with every step. You can watch them walk. You can see the gravel fly up right off the outside toe, the lateral toe when they're walking. So just try to decrease the influence of the lateral toe on a cowhock horse. I should even take this nail out, maybe fill in all that swedge with weld right there just to make that smooth. Puts a little more shoe mass there so he doesn't burn through it. Sometimes these horses get a little sore. Cowhock conformation, they can burn through that lateral toe in 10 to 14 days. Shoe strong on the medial toe. Everything to try to decrease the influence of the lateral toe in a cowhock horse. So if you remember any of my presentations, you know that I do like to show a horse race. It's getting late in the day, trying to get everybody's juices flowing again. I'm going to show you these two here. Wiggle It, Jiggle It, Always Be Mickey. Both world champions, both millionaires, multi-millionaires. Both of them all-time great competitors, and every time they raced, it was very much like.
He is third over on the outside. Shuffle to the inside is Artistic Major and the trailer. On the outside is Delta Winner, the half 53 flat, 27-3. Second, Pinot, and the battle's on. Wiggle It, Jiggle It on the inside. Always Be Mickey on the outside. Looking into the eye. Luck Be With You is getting a glorious trip to the inside. Third, racing fourth on the outside is All Bets Off. In their fifth American prime time. Tricky VP, a lot of work to do. They are sliding out on top, and they'll drive by 3/4 in 119 flat.
Ridiculous scratches, by the way.
Always Be Mickey on the outside. Wiggle It, Jiggle It on the inside. Poised to strike from third. Luck Be With You. They're out to turn it on their way home. Wiggle It, Jiggle It. Always Be Mickey into the passing lane. Here comes Luck Be With You. It's Always Be Mickey. Wiggle It, Jiggle It. What a race! Always Be Mickey on the outside. Always Be Mickey. Over Wiggle It, Jiggle It.
That was on a sloppy track at Scioto Downs. It's probably the top 3 fastest races all time there on a miserable night. Here's this horse again. I love this horse. He doesn't like me very much, but I've got these shoes on my wall in the shop, and I'm going to show him to you again. You're going to watch the fastest harness race of all time.
Third, Shambhala is right with him, racing in second with little more than 3/8 to go. Split the house third. All Bets Off is glued to the pylons fourth.
Let me get us ahead a little bit.
With him in second, 3/4 in 119-4. So they come to the top of the stretch. It's Always Be Mickey in front, and he eases away to a 2-length lead. Shambhala is tipped to the outside in second. All Bets Off racing in third. Always Be Mickey is full out. Shambhala trying to track him down on the outside. All Bets Off on the far outside. Always Be Mickey pacing home strongly. Shambhala second. Always Be Mickey is heading down to the line. Always Be Mickey in 146. World record!
Fastest race of all time. Still stands as such today, 5 years later. Always Be Mickey. He's had 2 crops old enough to race as a stallion. In 6 chances to win a Breeders' Crown, same as the Breeders' Cup. Always Be Mickey won 4 of the 6. The rest of the industry combined won the other 2. So it might be a good stallion too. Just one of my favorite horses, elite horses. They just look at you differently. if he could talk, he'd say, get on with your business, get out of here. So I love being around horses like that. Let me finish up the content here and get back. I'm just trying to get our juices going. When I pull a hind shoe off that looks like this, and it's always a hind shoe, I know this horse has a problem. I know it can be lameness inducing, it could be career threatening, it could even be life threatening. And yet often the barn isn't aware, denies, blind eye, deaf ear, don't want to talk about it. But I know in 40 years plus shoeing horses, there's only one way for a horse to do this to a shoe while it's on the foot. That's stall kicking. It's a hind end lameness that we don't talk about. I've had people get insulted because they're kicking the wall. No, he's not. Maybe I've impugned his manners or something, but yeah, he is. It's the only way that happens, and it can be devastating. Here's a horse that raced, actually, after that. 2 surgeries in different seasons, actually. He never had much issues on the track, but he sure did in the stall. These 2 surgeries were done by Dr. Patty Hogan, probably saved his career. He had a great horse trainer, 2 of them, Hall of Famer, Joe Holloway, Jimmy Tactor. The reason I showed you those races is because this is Always Be Mickey. All those screws were in that horse for those 2 races I just showed you. World champion, maybe a game-changing sire, and he almost wasn't as a racehorse, maybe even. I don't know if that's life-threatening. I'm not the surgeon, but sure looked pretty serious. Stall kicking. Don't ignore it, don't deny it. It's a thing. It's contagious. I don't know why, but it is. Here's some of the ways we deal with it. You know, you put that thing around the cannonball, slide it over the ankle and in the pasture, and sometimes that deters stall kicking. Shoe on the right is only like that to try to keep the hoof together so it doesn't destroy the thing in the stall, kicking the shoes off, and the shoe expands and widens through the hoof wall. The nails push right out through the hoof wall, destroying it. Pack the shoe on every day, rebuild the foot twice a month. The square toe there, again, be careful with those. Dr. Allen would tell you, and I would agree, careful with the square toes. The bar in the back is just to keep the shoe from being spread apart when he kicks the wall. Stall kicking, it's a big deal that nobody wants to talk about. And it's definitely a hind end lameness. So let me wrap up here and get done, get us back on track. Shoe the hind's bigger, not just longer, but wider web. Support what they're doing as they go through the gaits, the straights and the turns, the acceleration, the deceleration, adapting to lameness or whatever else happens in a race. It's remarkable how much they can do stride to stride. Understand the suspensory ligament apparatus and how our shoeing affects that apparatus. Be careful about changing them dramatically. Workload and surfaces are critical factors when we're shoeing the hind end or the front for that matter. I mean, if you think you're going to race on a deep track, don't be very aggressive. Take the stall kicking seriously. And I didn't write it here, but I said evaluate all limbs independently of each other. And I wanted to put in something Dr. Redden told me, talking about negative plantar angle. If we can have availability for x-rays for the horseshoer to see it, and we do at the track, but sometimes we just don't take the time. You know, if you can actually see, work with your veterinarian, farrier together, look at those x-rays and see what's going on in the foot before you start changing the plantar angle of the hind, can be very helpful to keep you out of trouble. But I appreciate you all listening to me. I appreciate to share my passion advocating for the racehorse, all horses actually, and thank you.
We're going to have
whatever he's going to say. No.
Well, thank you very much for your presentation.